It is so great to be here. I'm actually in Yerushalayim, and it's very nice to be making a Siyum in Yerushalayim after the year that everybody's had. It's incredible to be here with friends and family and colleagues, and it's nice to have all of you in all your different places by extension. So, what I want to do is I want to think about what we're calling the ethical floor and the ethical ceiling. Ethical floor is, let's say, you can't dip below this. This is your basic minimum standard. And I would assume that in general, law is actually trying to do that. It's trying to set an ethical floor. You don't want to dip below it. If you dip below it, you end up with what we might call something like midat stone, right? Like you're like a sodomite if that's what you're doing. But that's very different from the ethical ceiling, which is maybe something that you aspire to. And I'm not sure that we can always enforce on people an ethical ceiling because sometimes if you're trying to push people to go beyond the basic standard of what's suggested, you end up in a territory where you might be impinging on people's rights a little bit too much, right? So think about it, go back to COVID, let's say. If we're looking at a situation where we say to people, in order to keep each other safe, here is the basic foundational standard that everyone has to keep to. There might be people who end up being a little bit more machmira, and there might be people who say, no, the basic standard is what I'm looking at. And one of the things that I think is so interesting in both Bava Kama and Bava Metzia is that you find a discussion of both ethical floor, where we are going to legislate basic standards, but also an aspiration for the ethical ceiling. And one of the things that I wonder is how do you get people to aspire to an ethical ceiling if you can't make them do it? Or can you? So the first thing I want to show you is just a visual as we think about this question of what Bava Metzia really is about. Because it's true what Rabbanit Michelle is saying, Bava Metzia is really about trying to create a Ben Adam Chavero situation that is ruled by give and take, ethics, compromise, awareness of people's rights, awareness of our obligations. And I think writ large, it's trying to create a society that even someone like King Shapur might look at and say, hey, this actually makes sense. This is a really ethical society that you have going. And so one of the things that I noticed within Bava Metzia is just how often Sefer Mishlei was quoted. Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, is quoted over and over and over again in Bava Metzia. If you don't believe me, check out this visual. Sefaria has this amazing link. If you see here, www.sefaria.org.il/explore, and I'll put it in the chat in a minute, where you can look at how often a Masechet is quoted, how often, a book of Tanakh is quoted in a Masechet. So let's take a look down at Bava Metzia. You click on it, and here's what it shows you. These are the Svarim that are most quoted in Bava Metzia. A lot of Bereshit, Shmot, Vayikra, Bamidbar Dvarim. You would expect that. But the next most cited Sefer is Sefer Mishlei. And when I see that, it also makes me wonder, well, wait a second, where else is Sefer Mishlei highly quoted in Gemara? And if you don't believe me, look at the linker yourself. What you'll see is the places where Sefer Mishlei is mostly quoted are, get ready, Bava Metzia, Baba Batra, Sanhedrin. All of these Nizikin kind of build a proper society, which for anybody who studies Sefer Mishlei, you know that Sefer Mishlei is actually about creating a society in which people are diligent, do the right thing, don't steal, don't cheat, recognize that doing bad and violence don't pay off. And then, of course, the other two places where it features prominently, one is in Masechet Sota, because Mishlei is very much about the Isha Chachama and also the Isha Zara, going after the good woman, Eshet Chayil, and not going after the bad woman who is paganism. And it also features heavily in Masechet Brachot, which makes sense because Mishlei is trying to tell you what is the good life about at the very beginning. But when I saw this, I said to myself, this is a bigger story than just what do I do if I find lost property? It's a bigger story than I can't walk into somebody's house to collect their mashkon, to collect their surety, their collateral. There's something here about trying to create a society that is recognized by all human beings, right? Because Mishle is the kind of sefer that kind of speaks to humanity by all human beings as something that is remarkable and something to write home about. And so, in order to do that, it's really not enough to set an ethical floor. You have to be able to suggest an ethical ceiling as well. But how do you do it? One of the things that I think is really, really difficult is trying to get people to behave in general. And there are probably two general ways that we get people to behave. One is through rules and enforcement, and another is through maybe education, right? So, rules and enforcement is what we might say, and you're going to learn in Bava Batra, Kofin al Midat Sodom. We force people not to act like members of the Sodom society. How would you act like a member of Sodom? You would act that way if you actually are unwilling to let somebody else use something when it literally costs you nothing. Simply because you want to show that you own it. It's mine. It's mine, not yours. I always cite the example when I was a kid, one of my siblings, he finished his bagel, but there was half left. And I was like, hey, can I have it? And he's like, nope, that was my bagel. I'm not having it. You can't have it either. Threw it in the garbage, right? We actually can enforce, Beitin can enforce, and you're going to see in Bava Metzia in the first parak, in Bava Batra in the first parak. Beitin can enforce. You can't act that way. There is an ethical floor. Rights are not everything. But at the same time, education has to play a role in getting people to decide what they want to do, to decide to be better than just the bare minimum standard. And so back in Bava Kama, we saw a concept called, let's say, Yedei Shamayim, that you have to do something in order to do God's standards. So even if the Beit Din can't force you to do something, in order, let's say, Yedei Shamayim, you should do it. And in Bava Metzia, we see a similar concept, Lifnei Mishurat Hadin, that you go within the line of the law. The law allows you to go up to a certain line, and we're telling you, don't take everything that you can. Go a little bit before. Now, can we enforce that? It seems like that's actually a matter of discretion. It's a matter of education, where we say to people, we want you to do this, but we can't force you to do this. So as we run through Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Batra, we see that there's sort of a spectrum of tools at our disposal to try to help people behave properly, ben adam l'chavero, in such a way that a king Shapur might look and say, wow, you guys are impressive, what you have going on here. And one way is through enforcement, where Beit Din can say, you must do X because this is a basic standard. And another way is through education and teaching people of their own discretion to decide, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do. I don't have, for example, if you remember some of the cases from Bava Metzia, I don't have to return this object to you. We found it in the shuk. You already had yeush on it. You already despaired of ever getting it back. I don't actually have to give it back to you when you come. But with Nimisharat Din, I'm gonna. Or you lost these things 12 months ago. You're coming to me after 12 months and saying, these are my camels. It's too late. Yeush. With Nimisharat Din, let's take care of it. Or if you remember those porters who dropped the barrels and they said, we want to get paid anyway. And at first, their employer said, get paid? What do you mean? He took their clothing as collateral and said, you owe me money. You broke my stuff. And then he's told by a fellow rabbi, nah, you gotta give them their stuff back. And then they said, we're hungry. We need something to eat. We need our day's wages. And he said, really? But you broke my stuff. You didn't do the job. And he said, no, sorry, you got to give it to them. And he gave it to them. But what does he quote? He quotes Sefer Mishle. Last time I checked, Sefer Mishle is not a place where you find ironclad halakha lema'aseh rules. That's where you find educational aspiration. You want to be a good person? You want to walk in the ways of the righteous? You should give them back their clothes and you should pay them their wages, right? So we find this kind of educational approach. And I want to think with you for a few minutes. What are the benefits of using an enforcement approach? What are the benefits of using an educational approach? And there are many, many situations in which this comes into play. It's not just actually the way people interact with each other. Even Ben Adam Lamakom, you can ask these things. How do you get people to act the way that you want them to act? Or better yet, how do you create an environment in which the things that are going on are what you would want things to look like? So if you use the enforcement mechanism, right? Benefits of rules and enforcement. Here's a benefit, and you can put in the chat if you think of others. Here's a benefit of rules. They're very transparent. Everybody knows what they are. The rule is you have to wear your mask when you come within 6 feet of someone else in the supermarket in 2020, spring 2020. Okay? It's a rule. It's very clear. And usually these things are things people know beforehand. You can point to the sign. This is what it says. There's nothing vague here. It's very clear. Another benefit is it gets the job done. I don't care if you like wearing the mask. I don't care if you don't like wearing the mask. You're going to wear it. That's what's going to happen because it's a rule and we're going to enforce it. Very, very positive. Here are the drawbacks, right? A major drawback is if you're going to enforce a rule that is going to apply, let's say, across the board, you're going to have to be modest about it. You can't force everybody to go above and beyond. You can say, do this bare minimum. That's what rules and enforcement should do, right? It's like saying you're forced to do extra credit. You can't be forced to do extra credit. That's why it's extra credit, right? A second problem with it is, does it really inculcate good midot in people, or it just makes them do it, and the minute the rule is gone, they don't do it anymore, right? And they're just, right? So if Beit Din's not looking, I'll act like a sodomite because there's nobody here who's going to take me back and pull me and rein me in, right? On the other hand, you have education. I want to teach you to be a good person. I want to teach you that even if Beit Din can't get you to do something and can't penalize you, let's say Yidei Shamayim, you should do it, right? You should really do it. So I'm going to teach you that. Lifni Misharat Din, I can't force you to return that Aveda, to return that object, that lost object, but I'm going to tell you if you want to aspire, you really should do it. What are the benefits? It's all about inculcating virtue. It's all about creating good people. It's a beautiful thing. And in a certain sense, it actually will outlast any rule you make because it's not about your enforcement. It's not about people being, ooh, I have to follow the rules or I'm going to get in trouble. It's actually people being mafnim, people internalizing, right? What they're supposed to do. Or by the way, maybe doing that to impress someone else. Maybe they haven't internalized anything. But the point is, you don't have to tell them to do it. They're going to do it. But here's the problem. You know the problem. You saw it. Remember that story of the guy with the sticks? And he asked Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi to help him carry his sticks. And Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi doesn't have to help him carry his sticks. It's Talmid Chacham, and he's older. It's not appropriate. Zakin ve'eno fichvoto. It's not appropriate for him to have to do that. So Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi says to himself, okay, I know what I'm going to do. Of my own discretion, I'm going to help this guy. I'm going to give him money for his sticks instead of helping him carry them home. Gives him money for the sticks, takes the sticks and says, these sticks are half-care. Anybody who wants them can take them. The guy comes over and picks up his sticks again. He says, can you help me with my sticks? I want to get them home. And Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi says, no. Here's another $5. I'm not helping you get them home. I want you to take the money, right? And so he takes the money. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi puts down the sticks. The guy comes over again to get the sticks. Rabbi after this was ownerless for anybody to take except for you, right? Like fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. What's the problem with discretion? It's impossibly vague. What do you mean? Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi gets to just decide how he's going to help this guy? This guy wants help in a certain way, and Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi isn't going to give him the help that he wants. The standards are not clear. What's needed is not clear. You need so much communication in order to know what is actually going to help people in this situation. It's so different from rules, which are so clear and so obvious, right? The other thing I would say about discretion is the problem with it is that it's up to discretion, and people don't always use their discretion the way you want them to use it. So if what we're talking about is hitting an ethical ceiling, okay, so people don't always hit the ethical ceiling. The rules will be for the ethical floor and for the ethical ceiling. Some good people will do, some people won't. Okay, so this is sort of like the pitzul, the split that we would make between things that we enforce, like kofin al midat sedom, which you'll see in Bava Batra, and things that we educate towards but we can't enforce, like Masechet yedei shamayim, like lifnim mishurat hadin. Beautiful, amazing, done, finito, until you get to the Rishon. Because the Rishonim said, wait, no. Mishurat hadin, but it says you have to give the clothing and the money to the porters. It says you have to, when somebody asks, do I have to return this object? They're told you have to return it. In fact, the Gemara told us that the reason why the Beit HaMikdash, the second Beit HaMikdash, was destroyed is because Danu Dinehem Din Torah. They followed the strict letter of the law and they didn't do their din. They didn't do their legal decisions based on Lifnei Mishurat. So some Rishonim say, no, this discretion stuff, push it out of your mind. It's not, no, it's all rules. It's all rules. Even Lifnei Mishurat Din, we can force people to do Lifnei Mishurat Din, which is, by the way, a way of saying we kind of don't trust people. And it's also a way of saying, if we don't give people a reason that they have to do X, they may never do it. And we may never get beyond that ethical floor, and we actually really want to. So I find it really interesting to find some of the Rishonim, and some of them do this with, let's say, Yidei Shamayim also. They'll say, until you pay, even though it's only, let's say, Yidei Shamayim, we consider you a thief, and we won't let you give edut in Beit Din, right? They're trying to coerce you. They're trying to force your hand. They don't want you to have this full discretionary behavior. But I think the realm of discretion is super duper important. And I think it's why Mishlei is quoted so many times in Bava Metzia, because it's one thing to learn something from Shmot or from Vayikra or from Bamidbar or from Devarim, but to learn something from Mishlei is saying, look, I can't force you to do this, but this is the way you should be. This is what you should be doing. This is how we create the kind of society that we're trying to create. So try to be the best that you can be. Try to follow the advice that the parent gives to the child in Mishlei, which is be good, right? Be good. I don't need a pasuk in Vayikra to tell me be good. All of Mishlei just keeps saying be good, be good, be good, be good, right? So I think that's incredibly powerful. I want to share one more piece. We think of these things, like we look at it in the Gemara and it jumps off the page sometimes. The vividness of these examples of, an arnak, a wallet in the shuk, right? It jumps off the page. Or two brothers fighting over inheritance, which you'll see in Bava Batra, right? It jumps off the page. But I got to tell you, this stuff is live in Israeli law today. There is an incredible case. I think it's from the late 70s. It's Kitan Limited versus Sarah Weiss. And basically, the case is as follows. The case is, unfortunately, I'm going to stop smiling now because it's a very serious case, very unfortunate case. Someone who was a security guard at a company who had neshek, who had a weapon as part of their job, took that neshek home and used it to commit a crime. Okay. And now the company is being sued for giving that weapon to the person. There's some liability. Your employee used this. Yes, they were on their off time. They used the gun that you gave them, and we're suing you for damages. Now, across the board, this went to the Israeli Supreme Court. Across the board, everybody said, no. By law, you're not liable for that, right? You're really not liable for that. But here's where the question came up. Should we suggest that, lifnim mishurat hadin, to go beyond what you're required to do, maybe you should pay some damages? And I want to show you the language that two different justices use arguing against each other as to whether you should bring lifnim mishurat hadin into a late 20th century Israeli courtroom. Ready? I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if I can get the right thing for you. The right place. 1 second. Doesn't matter how many times I share my screen. It's always an issue. Is this the one that I want to show you? Okay, check it out. So we have, I need to be able to go down. Justice Menachem Elon, who is very well known for what we would call Mishpat Ivri, in the sense of a movement to bring in Torah and rabbinic and Talmudic law into secular Israeli jurisprudence in the courts. Okay, so he says it is a Jewish tradition and a fundamental principle in Jewish law that along with strict legal liability, there is an additional obligation to act like Mishurat Adin. It is of particular significance here that this obligation found one of its chief expressions in Jewish law in the field of torts, right? In our field, Bava Kama starting with, right? In a case precisely in point with the instant case, which was a case of Nezek, which again, back to Bava Kama, but we're like cumulative, right? Under our current legal system, we cannot force a person to act beyond the letter of the law. We can't force Lifnei Mishradin. He's not going to go as far as some of the Rishonim who say, no, we can force people to do Lifnei Mishradin. It is up to the initiative and the goodwill of the litigant. But it appears to me that under certain circumstances, it is appropriate for the sitting judge to make such a suggestion. I myself would exhort the vindicated party to behave in a manner beyond the letter of the law and to compensate the claimants as originally intended. Okay? ... And then, by the way, he quotes Mishlei. So he says, yes, that you should. Now, Justice Meir Shamgar took the opposite opinion. Now, remember, what they're arguing about here is not should we make them do Lifnei Mishurat Adin, but can we even suggest it? I strongly dissent from the objective revealed between the lines of the opinion of my distinguished colleague, Elon, that seeks to elevate payment of compensation Lifnei Mishurat Adin to the status of a settled general principle of the law of torts. Such an approach would necessarily bring about the filing of frivolous appeals, because people would say, you're forcing me to do Lifnei Mishurat Adin. Of course, he didn't say I'm forcing, right? But it would lead to appeals. My concern here is not for the time of the court, but the resulting consequence, namely the adverse effects on those appellants whose appeals have merit and who will have to wait even longer for a decision in their cases, right? People are so busy appealing a Lifnei Mishurat Adin ruling that the people who have real appeals to deal with, they actually never get their hearing. Moreover, and this is really the key, a legal system that deliberately chooses to abandon the boundary lines marked out in the substantive law and to add as an additional and alternative stratum layer and as an established part of the system a recommendation for the payment of compensation beyond what the law requires necessarily acts according to impossibly vague standards, which ultimately depend on the fortuity of which particular judge sits when the case is reached. So this judge thinks Lifnei Mishurat Adin constitutes this, and this judge thinks Lifnei Mishurat Adin is constituted by that. There's no actual standard. Is it $20? Is it $100? Is it $1,000? Such a system will, over the course of time, bring about confusion in the law and adversely affect the rights of the parties. The absence of clear standards may also often actually produce inconsistent results. Now, I love this because whether you're a lawyer or you're not a lawyer, what I love seeing is these principles acted upon in contemporary life, saying, of course, everybody's goal is that we should have a society where people are not taken advantage of. Of course, that's everybody's goal. But how do you go about it? Is there a possibility that, yes, people not getting taken advantage of, the law can handle that? But there might be something above people not getting taken advantage of. The law may not be able to touch it. People benefiting, the law may not be able to touch it. What may only be able to touch it is just teaching people to be good, right? And so one of the things that I think is kind of remarkable is that for Chazal, and I do wonder if some of this is because they themselves don't have a fully fleshed out court system that is, enforceable in the ways that under an imperial rule it would be enforceable. I wonder if some of that actually leads them to be equally interested in here are the laws that are enforceable as they are interested in here's the education that you need to do in order for people to move beyond even where the law can get them, right? As opposed to something where the legal system itself is what's so vaunted. This is actually, we're trying to get to a certain goal, which is applying Torah principles in the world. Some of that is going to be through law and enforcement, and some of that is going to be through education and discretion. Mazel tov to everybody. And may we merit to act these things out and to build a society that looks like that and continue to shape it and edit it where it goes wrong.